In 1995, a billionaire adopted 3 black girls and gave them the life every child dreams of. For 20 years, everything seemed perfect, until one night the phone rings. On the other end is the daughter who vanished without a trace. She whispers, "Dad, you were never supposed to know." And the entire world he built shatters. Because she hasn't just been missing, she's been hiding inside a dangerous cult tied to a man he thought was dead. And now she warns him that her sisters are next. A loving father, 3 daughters in danger. A secret powerful enough to destroy everything. When the truth comes home after 20 years, can this family survive what it brings with it? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The cool spring breeze whispered through Detroit streets as Baron Pike's Mercedes pulled up to the weathered community center. Faded brick walls and patched windows spoke of years of use, but warm light spilled from within. Baron adjusted his plain black sweater, carefully chosen to help him blend in, and slipped quietly through the back entrance. He found an empty metal folding chair in the last row, content to observe without drawing attention. The familiar weight of anonymity settled over him like a comfortable coat. Here, he wasn't the billionaire media mogul whose face graced magazine covers. He was just another face in the crowd, exactly as he preferred for these small community events. The makeshift stage creaked as 3 young black sisters stepped into the spotlight. Their matching white dresses gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, somehow making them look both angelic and more vulnerable. The oldest girl, who looked about 10, stood protectively close to her sisters. The middle sister, around 8, squared her shoulders with quiet determination. The youngest, barely 6, clutched her older sister's hands, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and nervousness. When they began to sing, time seemed to stop. Their voices rose in perfect harmony, a gospel hymn that spoke of hope and grace flowing through the crowded room. The oldest girl's clear soprano soared above her sister's sweet, supporting notes, telling a story of faith that transcended their young years. Baron found himself transfixed. Something in their performance reached past his carefully maintained composure and touched a place in his heart he thought had died with his wife years ago. To his surprise, he felt moisture on his cheeks. He quickly wiped away the tears, but couldn't take his eyes off the 3 girls whose voices seemed to carry all the joy and pain of life itself. The spell was broken by screams from backstage. Orange flames licked up the worn curtain, and thick black smoke began pouring into the auditorium. People jumped to their feet, pushing toward the exits in panic. But Baron was already moving forward, against the tide of bodies, toward the stage where the 3 girls stood frozen in fear. "This way!" he called out, extending his hands to them. The oldest sister reacted first, pushing her younger siblings toward him. Baron scooped up the smallest girl while guiding the other 2 through the thickening smoke. His eyes burned and his lungs protested, but he didn't slow down until they reached the safety of the parking lot. Firefighters arrived within minutes, their sirens piercing the night as they battled the blaze. In the chaos, Baron stayed with the girls, making sure paramedics checked them for smoke inhalation. Their mother appeared briefly at the hospital, wild-eyed and agitated, but disappeared before doctors could complete their examination. Hours stretched into the night as Baron sat in an uncomfortable waiting room chair, unable to leave while the girls' fate remained uncertain. A weary-looking social worker introduced herself as Rita Hollings from Child Protective Services. She explained the situation in quiet, professional tones. With no guardian present and no immediate family available, the sisters would likely be placed in separate foster homes. Separate them? Baron's voice came out sharper than intended. He softened his tone, looking at the 3 girls huddled together on a nearby bench. The oldest sister, Ariel, he'd learned, held her siblings close, as if trying to protect them from the world itself. Naomi, the middle child, maintained a brave face despite her trembling lips. Little Kira had finally succumbed to exhaustion, her head resting in Ariel's lap. Something shifted inside Baron's chest, a decision forming before he even fully understood it. What if... He paused, surprised by his own words. What if I adopted them? All of them together? Rita's eyebrows rose slightly, but her voice remained steady. Mr. Pike, adoption is a serious commitment. These children have experienced trauma. They'll need stability, patience, understanding. I understand. Baron interrupted gently. I know it won't be easy, but I can't let them be separated. They need each other. And maybe... He glanced again at the sleeping girls. Maybe I need them too. The next few hours passed in a blur of preliminary paperwork and arrangements. As dawn began to paint the sky in soft pinks and golds, Baron helped the exhausted girls into his car. The sisters curled together in the back seat, their small bodies gravitating toward each other even in sleep. As he drove toward home, Ariel's head gradually came to rest against his shoulder, followed by Naomi and Kira leaning against their older sister. Baron glanced in the rearview mirror at their peaceful faces, these 3 precious lives now entrusted to his care. His carefully ordered world had been completely upended in a single night. His mansion would no longer be quiet and empty. His schedule would no longer revolve solely around board meetings and business deals. Nothing would ever be the same. And as the morning sun warmed his face, Baron Pike realized he wouldn't want it any other way. These girls had awakened something in him he thought was lost forever. The ability to love, to hope, to believe in something bigger than himself. The road ahead would be challenging, but in that moment, driving through the streets of Detroit with 3 sleeping angels beside him, he knew with absolute certainty that his life had changed for the better. The quiet hum of the engine and the gentle breathing of the girls filled the car as they headed home, not just to his house, but to the beginning of their new life together as a family. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across Baron Pike's penthouse apartment. Kira was the first to stir, her small frame shooting upright in the unfamiliar bed. Her wide eyes took in the panoramic view of Detroit's skyline, so different from the broken windows and boarded-up buildings she was used to seeing. "Ariel! Naomi!" She whispered urgently, shaking her sisters awake. "Look at this! We're up in the clouds!" Ariel, ever the protective oldest sister, quickly gathered her bearings as she pulled back the luxurious cotton sheets. Naomi pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging the glass as she gazed at the city spread out below them. "Good morning, girls." Baron's gentle voice came from the doorway. He stood there somewhat awkwardly, already dressed in a crisp business suit, but holding a spatula in one hand. "I thought you might be hungry. I'm attempting pancakes, though I should warn you, it's been a while since I've cooked anything." The girls exchanged uncertain glances, but the rumbling of their stomachs won out over hesitation. They followed him to the kitchen, where a light dusting of flour covered nearly every surface. A stack of slightly misshapen pancakes sat on a plate, and the smell of maple syrup filled the air. "I wasn't sure what you liked," Baron admitted, "so I got different toppings." He gestured to an array of fresh berries, whipped cream, and chocolate chips spread across the counter. Over the next few weeks, Baron threw himself into fatherhood with the same determination he'd always applied to his business ventures. His assistant had to completely reorganize his schedule to accommodate school drop-offs and pickups. Board meetings were rescheduled around parent-teacher conferences. The CEO of Pike Media Group could often be found sitting at the kitchen table, helping with multiplication tables and grammar homework. One particularly memorable afternoon, Baron found himself watching YouTube tutorials on hair braiding. Kira sat patiently on a kitchen stool while he attempted to replicate the intricate patterns shown on the screen. Ouch! Kira winced as he accidentally pulled too hard. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Baron apologized, his usually steady hands fumbling with the thin sections of hair. After 45 minutes of struggle, the result looked nothing like the neat French braid in the tutorial. Instead, it resembled something closer to a bird's nest. Ariel couldn't help but laugh. Here, let me show you, she offered, demonstrating the proper technique on Naomi's hair. Baron watched intently, determined to master this new skill for his daughters. The media caught wind of the adoption story within the first month. Headlines proclaimed Billionaire's Heart of Gold and the Pike Prodigies, a modern miracle. Photographers tried to catch glimpses of the family, but Baron was fierce in protecting their privacy, especially during this delicate transition period. Understanding the challenges ahead, Baron hired Ms. Thompson, a skilled tutor who specialized in helping children catch up academically. The girls had missed a lot of school during their unstable early years, but they proved to be quick learners. He also brought in Dr. Rachel Chen, a child psychologist who could help them process their past trauma and adjust to their new life. They're remarkably resilient, Dr. Chen told Baron during one of their weekly check-ins. But they need consistency and patience. They need to know this is real, that you're not going to disappear. Baron took these words to heart. He made sure to be present for every small milestone: Naomi's science fair project, Ariel's basketball games, Kira's choir performances. Each achievement, no matter how minor, was celebrated as a family. The real breakthrough came during their first proper family dinner, about 6 weeks after the adoption. Baron had hired a chef to prepare their meals, but this night was different. The girls had asked to cook together, wanting to share some of their grandmother's recipes. They spent the afternoon in the kitchen, with Ariel teaching Baron how to season the chicken just right, while Naomi and Kira worked on the cornbread. When they finally sat down to eat, Baron started to pick up his fork, but Kira's small hand caught his wrist. "We haven't said grace yet," she said softly. "We always hold hands for grace," Naomi added, extending her hand toward him. Baron felt something catch in his throat as he looked at the 3 hopeful faces around the table. He reached out, completing the circle, and bowed his head as Kira's clear voice filled the room with a simple prayer of thanksgiving. That night, as the city lights twinkled beyond the windows, Baron went through what had become his favorite part of the day, tucking each girl into bed. He started with Ariel, who tried to pretend she was too old for bedtime rituals, but still smiled when he kissed her forehead. Naomi was next, already half asleep, but still managing to mumble, "Good night, Dad," the first time any of them had called him that. Finally, he came to Kira's room. She was curled up with the stuffed elephant he'd bought her during their first shopping trip, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Will you be here in the morning?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. "I'll be here every morning," Baron promised, smoothing her blanket. "You're safe now, all of you." As he stood in the hallway between their rooms, Baron closed his eyes and offered a silent prayer of his own, one of profound gratitude for the miracle of these 3 girls who had transformed his lonely existence into something rich with purpose and love. The sound of their steady breathing filled the quiet apartment, a peaceful symphony of trust and security that meant more to him than all his worldly success combined. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as 15-year-old Ariel Pike stepped up to the podium. Her crisp blazer and confident stance reflected years of preparation for this moment, the state debate championships. In the front row, Baron sat with 12-year-old Kira and 14-year-old Naomi, all 3 wearing matching Team Ariel buttons. "The resolution before us today," Ariel began, her voice clear and steady, "concerns environmental protection versus economic growth. Her arguments flowed with precision, each point building upon the last. When she finished, Baron couldn't help but beam with pride. She'd come so far from the hesitant 10-year-old who used to hide behind her sisters. That same month, Naomi burst into Baron's home office, laptop in hand. "Dad, look what I made!" Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she showed him her first computer program, a simple game where players had to solve math puzzles to advance. "Ms. Thompson says I could maybe sell it to other schools for their math classes." Meanwhile, Kira's voice filled their home daily as she practiced for her upcoming choir recital. Her natural talent had blossomed under proper training, and she'd recently been chosen as the youngest soloist in her school's history. The years seemed to flow together in a stream of precious moments. Christmas mornings became elaborate affairs, with Baron insisting on maintaining surprise even as the girls grew older. One memorable year, he arranged for artificial snow to cover the penthouse terrace, creating a winter wonderland 30 stories above Detroit. "Dad, we're too old for this," 16-year-old Naomi protested, even as she joined her sisters in making snow angels. "You're never too old for magic," Baron replied, snapping photos of their joy-filled faces. Birthdays were celebrated with equal enthusiasm. For Ariel's 18th birthday, Baron rented out their favorite restaurant and invited every friend she'd made since coming into his life. When Naomi turned 16, he helped her organize a tech fair for underprivileged kids, combining her passion for computers with their family's commitment to giving back. Kira's Sweet 16 featured a gospel choir flash mob that she still talked about years later. High school graduations came in quick succession. Ariel's valedictorian speech moved the audience to tears as she spoke about second chances and the power of love to transform lives. Naomi graduated with highest honors in computer science, already holding several patents for educational software. Kira's graduation ceremony turned into an impromptu concert when she was asked to perform an unexpected solo. College brought new challenges and triumphs. Ariel chose journalism at Columbia, driven by a desire to uncover truth and give voice to the voiceless. Naomi stayed closer to home at MIT, quickly becoming known for her innovative approaches to technology education. Kira attended Berklee College of Music, where her unique blend of gospel and contemporary styles began attracting attention beyond campus. Through it all, Baron remained their strongest supporter. He flew to every important performance, presentation, and ceremony. His office walls, once covered in business awards, now displayed their achievements. Ariel's first published article, Naomi's tech competition medals, Kira's concert programs. By 2015, the Pike sisters had fully come into their own. At 30 years old, Ariel had built a reputation as a fearless investigative journalist, breaking stories about corruption and social injustice. Her series on human trafficking earned her first Pulitzer nomination. Naomi, 28, launched her own tech company focusing on educational software for underserved communities. Pike Educational Systems quickly became known for its innovative approaches to learning, especially for children with limited access to traditional resources. 26-year-old Kira's gospel career soared as she found her unique voice, blending traditional spirituals with contemporary arrangements. Her debut album reached #1 on the gospel charts, but she remained grounded, often performing free concerts in communities like the one where they'd grown up. That summer evening in 2015 started like any other family dinner. They gathered at Baron's penthouse, sharing stories and plans over their favorite comfort food. Ariel mentioned her upcoming assignment, an investigation into charitable organization fraud. "Just a routine story," she assured them, helping Kira clear the dishes. "Should only take a few days to gather the information I need." "Be careful anyway," Baron said, pulling her into a hug. "You know how these stories can sometimes take unexpected turns." "Always am, Dad." Ariel smiled, tapping the emergency beacon he'd insisted all three sisters carry. "I'll check in every few hours." Naomi looked up from her tablet. "I updated the tracking app on your phone. Signal's stronger now. You two worry too much." Ariel laughed, but she hugged them both extra tight. "Kira, save me a ticket for your concert next week. I wouldn't miss it for anything." "Front row as always," Kira promised, wrapping her arms around her oldest sister. "Call when you get to your hotel, okay?" "Of course. Love you all." Ariel called over her shoulder as she stepped into the elevator, her laptop bag slung across her body, reporter's notebook in hand. They watched her taxi pull away from the building, none of them knowing that the familiar sight of Ariel heading off to chase a story would be their last glimpse of her for a very long time. Her promised call never came that night, or any night after. The first few hours of silence seemed normal. She often got caught up in her work. But as evening turned to night, and night to morning with no word, the familiar rhythm of their family life began to fracture. Naomi's tracking app showed Ariel's phone going dark somewhere in downtown Detroit. Kira's calls went straight to voicemail. Barron's extensive network of contacts could find no trace of his eldest daughter. The Pike family's world, built so carefully over 20 years of love and trust, started to crumble with each passing hour of silence. The next morning's sunrise brought no comfort to the Pike family. Barron jolted awake to his phone buzzing with urgent news alerts. His hands trembled as he read the messages. Ariel had never checked into the Hotel St. Regis. Her rental car, a silver Toyota Camry, sat abandoned in a downtown Detroit parking lot. Her phone was completely dead, not just turned off, but disabled in a way that even Naomi's sophisticated tracking systems couldn't penetrate. "Dad?" Kira's voice quivered from the doorway of his home office, where he'd fallen asleep in his chair. "Any news?" Barron tried to steady his voice. "The police are investigating, sweetheart. They're treating it as a priority case." Naomi appeared behind her sister, her usual confident demeanor cracking. "I've tried everything. Every digital footprint, every security camera feed I can access. It's like she just vanished." The sisters moved toward their father like magnets, just as they had as children during thunderstorms. They clung to him, their bodies shaking with silent sobs. Barron wrapped his arms around them, trying to be the strong father they needed while his own heart threatened to shatter. Days crawled by with excruciating slowness. Barron barely touched the elaborate meals his housekeeper prepared, unable to swallow past the constant lump in his throat. Sleep became a distant memory. He spent nights pacing his penthouse, jumping at every phone ring, every email notification. The media descended like vultures. "Pike prodigy missing," screamed newspaper headlines. Television shows ran special segments speculating about her disappearance. Some suggested she'd planned it herself, wanting to escape her high-profile life. Others hinted at darker possibilities, kidnapping or worse. Each theory felt like a physical blow to the family. Naomi threw herself into the search, using her tech skills to scan social media, security footage, and financial records. Dark circles formed under her eyes as she worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and determination. Kira's usually joyful voice grew hoarse from crying, but she led prayer circles that grew from dozens to hundreds of participants. Barron spared no expense and called in every favor he'd accumulated in his decades of business. Private investigators combed through Detroit. Reward money for information grew to amounts that made headlines. He hired boats to drag the river, brought in search dogs, and plastered Ariel's photo across billboards nationwide. Weeks turned into months. Spring became summer, summer faded to fall, and still no sign of Ariel. Each lead that fizzled out took another piece of their hope with it. But Barron refused to give up. He organized weekly prayer vigils in the park, where he'd first heard his daughters sing. Hundreds attended, holding candles and singing Kira's gospel songs, their voices rising into the night sky like a plea to heaven. The holidays arrived with a crushing weight of emptiness. They set Ariel's place at Thanksgiving dinner, staring at her empty chair. At Christmas, her stocking hung untouched, her carefully chosen gifts remaining wrapped under the tree. Baron found himself standing in her untouched bedroom late at night, holding her favorite sweater, trying to remember her laugh. When 1 year had passed, the authorities approached Baron with gentle suggestions about declaring Ariel legally deceased. He fought against it with everything he had, but eventually the practical matters of her estate, her assets, and her affairs needed to be addressed. The memorial service was held in the same church where Ariel had been baptized years ago. Hundreds of mourners filled the pews, colleagues, friends, readers who'd been touched by her articles, people whose lives she'd changed through her investigations. Baron stood at the altar, holding a framed photo of Ariel, her last professional headshot, showing her confident smile and determined eyes. His hands shook as he tried to place it beside the flowers. His knees buckled suddenly, grief finally overwhelming his strength. Naomi and Kira rushed forward to catch him, their own faces streaked with tears. They held each other up, 3 broken pieces of what had once been a perfect whole. The photo of Ariel seemed to watch over them as they wept, their sobs echoing in the hushed church. Kira's voice, usually so strong and sure, broke as she tried to sing Amazing Grace. Naomi gripped her sister's hand so tight her knuckles turned white. And Baron, the powerful man who had given 3 orphaned girls a second chance at life, could only whisper his daughter's name over and over, a prayer without answer. The loss felt unbearable, a weight too heavy to carry. Yet somehow they stood there together, holding each other up, just as they had done since that first night in 1995 when they became a family. The photo of Ariel smiled down at them, a frozen moment of happiness that now felt like it belonged to another lifetime. Through the stained glass windows, afternoon sunlight cast colorful shadows across the altar, across the photo, across 3 faces marked by grief but still bound together by love. In that sacred space, surrounded by flowers and tears and memories, the remaining Pikes faced their new reality. A family of 4 become 3, carrying an absence that would never stop aching. The grandfather clock in Baron Pike's study chimed midnight, its deep resonance echoing through the empty penthouse. He sat alone in his leather chair, a heavy leather-bound scrapbook spread across his lap. The warm glow of his desk lamp cast shadows across pages filled with newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes. A chronicle of his daughters' lives. His fingers traced a photo of Ariel at her high school graduation. Her bright smile and determined eyes stared back at him, so full of promise and dreams. That was before everything changed, before she vanished, before their family fractured. 2 years had passed since the memorial service, but the weight of loss still pressed heavily on his shoulders. The business titan who once commanded boardrooms now spent his nights lost in memories, searching old photos for answers that never came. The study felt too quiet, too empty. Even after all this time, he found himself straining to hear the echoes of laughter that used to fill these rooms, the sound of Ariel debating current events over dinner, Naomi's fingers clicking away at her computer keyboard, Kira's voice lifting in song as she practiced. The phone's sudden ring pierced the silence, making him jump. Baron glanced at his watch, 12:15 in the morning. Probably another spam call. They seemed to come more frequently these days, as if the world was determined not to let him rest. With a weary sigh, he reached for the receiver. "Hello?" His voice sounded hollow, even to his own ears. The line crackled with static. Then a whisper so faint he almost missed it. "Dad, it's me." Baron's heart stopped. The scrapbook slipped from his lap, photos scattering across the floor. That voice, he would know it anywhere. His hands began to shake as he gripped the phone tighter. "Ariel." The name came out as a strangled gasp. "Baby girl, is that really you?" "Please," she whispered urgently. "Don't interrupt, and don't try to trace this call. I don't have much time." Baron's mind raced. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, to tell her how much they'd missed her. But something in her tone made him hold back. He forced himself to stay silent, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "I'm alive," Ariel continued, her voice trembling. "I need you to know that I didn't disappear because of anything you or the girls did. I chose to vanish. I had to." Baron gripped his desk for support as she spoke. His daughter was alive. After 2 years of grief and uncertainty, she was alive and speaking to him. "I was investigating a group called the Covenant Gatekeepers," she explained quickly. "They present themselves as a spiritual movement, but they're really a cult. I got too close, Dad. They discovered who I was. I've been in hiding ever since." Her words tumbled out faster now, as if she feared being cut off. "But there's more. Do you remember Silas Rourke?" Baron's blood ran cold at the name. Silas Rourke, his greatest business rival, the man whose ruthless tactics had nearly destroyed Pike Media Group a decade ago, the man who had supposedly died in a yacht accident. "He's connected to all of this," Ariel continued. "He's been pulling strings from the shadows for years. Dad, they had people watching us since we were children. Hidden handlers, grooming us, especially me. They saw potential in my investigative skills. They wanted to use me." A sick feeling settled in Baron's stomach. All those years he'd thought his daughters were safe, protected by his wealth and influence. But there had been invisible threats circling them like sharks, waiting to strike. "But that's not why I'm calling." Ariel's voice grew more urgent. "Dad, they're not done. Naomi and Kira, they're targets now. The gatekeepers are planning something. I don't know exactly what, but—" The line suddenly filled with static. Baron pressed the phone harder against his ear, straining to hear. "Ariel! Ariel!" But there was only silence. The connection was dead. Baron sat frozen, the dead receiver still clutched in his hand. Outside his study windows, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the Detroit skyline. The city was waking up to just another day, but his world had been completely upended. His daughter was alive. The knowledge sent waves of relief, joy, and terror crashing through him. But she was in danger, and now Naomi and Kira were too. The scattered photos from the fallen scrapbook caught his eye, snapshots of his daughters growing up, becoming strong, brilliant women. He had promised to protect them that first night in 1995 when he brought them home. Now that promise was being tested in ways he had never imagined. His hands wouldn't stop trembling as the weight of Ariel's warnings settled over him. Silas Rourke, a name he had hoped never to hear again, was somehow orchestrating this nightmare from beyond his supposed grave. The Covenant gatekeepers had been watching, waiting, manipulating events from the shadows for years. The soft, golden light of dawn crept across his desk, illuminating the scattered pieces of his family's past. But now that light seemed to mock him, revealing how blind he had been to the darkness that had been surrounding his children all along. Baron's expensive leather shoes squeaked against the polished kitchen floor as he paced back and forth. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, but he barely noticed its warmth. His mind kept replaying Ariel's words from the night before, each detail burning deeper into his consciousness. With trembling fingers, he pulled out his phone and called Naomi first. She answered on the second ring. "Dad, it's 7 in the morning. Is everything okay?" I need you to come home right away, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. It's important, sweetheart. Very important. A pause. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He made the same call to Kira, who immediately picked up on his tension. Should I be worried, Daddy? Just come home, baby girl, please. While waiting, Baron ordered breakfast from their favorite deli, comfort food they'd need for the conversation ahead. By 8:15, both daughters sat at the kitchen island, picking at bagels and watching their father with growing concern. Last night, Baron began, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug. I received a phone call from Ariel. Kira's bagel dropped to her plate. Naomi's face went pale. That's not possible, Naomi whispered. We had a memorial service. She's alive, Baron said firmly. She's been in hiding, investigating a group called the Covenant Gatekeepers. He shared everything from the brief conversation, the cult, Silas Rourke's involvement, the warning about his younger daughters being targets. With each revelation, the kitchen grew heavier with tension. Kira's eyes filled with tears. She's really alive? All this time she's been alive? How could she do this to us? Naomi suddenly burst out, pushing away from the counter. 2 years! 2 years we thought she was dead. We grieved for her. How could she just disappear? She was trying to protect us, Baron said softly. Whatever she uncovered about this group, it was serious enough that she felt going dark was her only option. But we're her family, Kira protested. We could have helped her. Naomi paced the kitchen, mirroring her father's earlier movements. And now what? We're supposed to be scared because some mysterious cult might be after us? This sounds crazy, Dad. Maybe it wasn't really her. Maybe someone's playing a cruel joke. It was her, Baron said with absolute certainty. I'd know her voice anywhere. He spent the next hour calling contacts in the FBI and other federal agencies, but without concrete evidence, they treated his story with polite skepticism. One agent even suggested grief counseling, making Baron's blood boil. They think I'm delusional, he told his daughters after hanging up from the last call. We're on our own. Not completely, Naomi said, her initial anger giving way to determination. She pulled out her laptop. I can start digging into the Covenant Gatekeepers, see what kind of digital footprint they have. And I can reach out to my church network. Kira added. Someone might have heard something about this group. Baron nodded, already making calls to private security firms. By afternoon, his study was filled with former intelligence operatives and security experts, led by Marcus Hale, a veteran with decades of experience. We need to establish a protection detail immediately, Marcus advised, studying blueprints of both daughters' homes. And start deep background checks on everyone in their lives. Days passed in a blur of investigation and mounting tension. Naomi discovered hidden financial transactions linking shell companies to properties across the country. Kira's contacts reported whispers of a secretive spiritual movement gaining influence in wealthy circles. Marcus's team uncovered more disturbing patterns. Your daughter's journalism work? He told Baron, spreading articles across the desk. In the months before she disappeared, she was investigating corporate fraud cases. Look at the companies involved. Baron leaned forward, scanning the headlines. Each company had ties to larger entities, which connected to other shell corporations, forming a web that all pointed back to one source, the Covenant Gatekeepers. She was getting close, Marcus said grimly. Too close. On the 7th night after the phone call, Baron couldn't sleep. He wandered into Ariel's old room, preserved exactly as she'd left it. His eyes fell on her Bible, sitting on the bedside table. Something tugged at his memory. How she'd always tucked important notes between specific pages. He picked up the worn book, fingers trembling as he flipped through it. There, between the pages of Psalm 27, he found it. Numbers written in Ariel's precise handwriting, coordinates. His heart raced as he remembered their old game. When the girls were young, he'd send them on treasure hunts, hiding clues in their favorite books. Ariel had loved it so much that even as a teenager, she'd leave him coordinates to find her at school events or recitals. This was a message meant only for him, an invitation hidden where only a father would think to look. Baron stared at the numbers, understanding flooding through him. She wanted him to come alone, to follow these coordinates to wherever they led, without backup or protection. His security team would strongly advise against it. His daughters would beg him not to go. But as he stood in Ariel's room, holding her Bible and those precious coordinates, Baron knew what he had to do. He carefully copied the numbers onto a slip of paper, tucking it into his wallet. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever trap might be waiting, he would go. Because somewhere at the end of those coordinates was his eldest daughter, and nothing in heaven or earth would stop him from bringing her home. The desert highway stretched endlessly before Baron's car as he drove through the Nevada night. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, mind racing with possibilities and fears. The coordinates from Ariel's Bible had led him to this remote location, hours from the nearest major city. The headlights caught a weathered wooden sign, Grace Chapel, all welcome. The small church sat alone against the starlit sky, its white paint peeling and windows dark. Baron's heart pounded as he pulled into the empty gravel parking lot. He sat in the car for a long moment, scanning the area for any signs of danger. The chapel looked abandoned, but a faint glow flickered through one of the stained glass windows. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out into the cool desert air. The wooden steps creaked under his feet as he climbed to the chapel door. It opened with a gentle push, hinges groaning softly. The interior was dim, lit only by a few candles near the altar. Dust motes danced in the weak light, and the musty scent of old hymnals filled the air. "Hello?" he called out softly, his voice echoing in the empty sanctuary. Movement caught his eye as a figure stepped out from behind a stone pillar. Baron's breath caught in his throat. Even in the dim light, he would know that silhouette anywhere. "Daddy!" Ariel's voice trembled. She looked so different, thinner than he remembered, with dark circles under her eyes and her once vibrant face drawn with exhaustion. But her eyes still held that same fierce intelligence, that unwavering spirit he'd always admired. "Ariel," he whispered, and then they were running toward each other. She collapsed into his arms with a sob, and Baron held her tight, tears streaming down his face. His baby girl, alive, real, solid in his embrace after 2 years of aching emptiness. "I'm sorry," she cried into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Daddy. I never wanted to hurt you all like that." "Shh," he soothed, stroking her hair just like he used to when she was small. "You're here now. You're safe." They sank onto a nearby pew, neither wanting to let go. Baron studied her face in the candlelight, noting new lines of worry and strain that hadn't been there before. "I didn't know what else to do," Ariel finally said, wiping her eyes. "When I discovered how deep the corruption went, how many powerful people were involved, I couldn't risk them hurting you or the girls." "Tell me everything," Baron said gently. Ariel took a shaky breath. "It started with that last story I was working on, what seemed like a simple case of corporate fraud. But as I dug deeper, I found connections to the Covenant gatekeepers. They present themselves as a spiritual movement for elite business people, but it's really a front for money laundering, blackmail, and worse." She described months of careful investigation, gathering evidence and mapping the organization's structure. But they had people everywhere, in law enforcement, government, media. When they realized I was getting close to exposing them, they sent someone to warn me. They knew everything about our family, Dad. They had photos of Naomi at her office, Kira at church. Her voice broke. I couldn't let them hurt my sisters, so I ran. Went underground. Spent these past 2 years documenting everything, building an airtight case. You could have come to me, Baron said softly. We could have faced this together. I wanted to protect you too. She whispered. After Mum died, you rebuilt your whole life around us. I couldn't bear the thought of them using me to destroy everything you'd worked for. Baron took her hands in his. Ariel, listen to me. Nothing, no company, no reputation, no amount of money matters more to me than you girls. You're my greatest blessing, my most important work. Fresh tears spilled down Ariel's cheeks. I missed you so much, Daddy. Let's pray, he said quietly, and she nodded. They bowed their heads together in the flickering candlelight. Baron's deep voice filled the empty chapel as he thanked God for protecting his daughter, for bringing her back to him. Ariel's quiet Amen seemed to echo with renewed hope. Through the night they talked. Baron shared stories of her sisters, Naomi's growing tech empire, Kira's musical success. Ariel spoke of her time in hiding, of close calls and lonely nights. As the hours passed, Baron gradually convinced her that coming home was the right choice. We'll keep it completely secret, he assured her. I have a secure property outside the city where you'll be safe while we figure out our next steps. Your sisters need to know you're alive, Ariel. We can protect each other better together. The first rays of dawn were painting the desert sky when they finally left the chapel. Ariel paused at the door, looking back at the sacred space that had sheltered their reunion. In the car, the familiar leather seats and soft engine hum surrounded them like a cocoon of safety. Within minutes, Ariel's head began to droop. Baron glanced over to see her fighting to keep her eyes open. Sleep, sweetheart, he said softly. I'll keep watch. She gave him a tired smile, so like the ones she'd given him as a child after long days of adventure. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, baby girl. As Ariel drifted off beside him, Baron kept one hand on the wheel and the other protectively near his daughter. The rising sun painted the desert in shades of gold, and for the first time in 2 years, his heart felt truly whole. He watched her sleep peacefully, marveling at how, even after everything she'd been through, she still trusted him enough to let down her guard completely. In sleep, the worry lines eased from her face, and he could see glimpses of both the little girl she'd been and the strong woman she'd become. The miles rolled by as Baron drove them toward safety. His precious daughter finally returned to him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family, just as they always had. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows of Baron Pike's estate as he led Ariel through the side entrance. Her heart pounded with each step, knowing her sisters waited just beyond the heavy oak door. After 2 years of isolation and fear, the familiar scents of home, lemon polish, fresh flowers, and her father's cologne nearly overwhelmed her. They're in the living room, Baron whispered, squeezing her shoulder gently. Take all the time you need. Ariel nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Her legs felt like lead as she moved down the hallway, muscle memory guiding her toward the sound of quiet voices. She paused in the doorway, drinking in the sight of her sisters. Naomi sat rigid on the edge of the sofa, her fingers drumming anxiously against her knee. Kira paced by the windows, wringing her hands. Both froze when they sensed her presence. For one endless moment, no one moved. Then Naomi launched herself across the room with a strangled cry that was part sob, part shout. She slammed into Ariel with such force that they stumbled backward. "You're alive!" Naomi choked out, her fingers digging into Ariel's shoulders. "You're alive? You're alive?" Her voice cracked with anger and relief. "How could you do this to us? We thought you were dead." But even as she berated her sister, Naomi clung tighter, as if afraid Ariel might disappear again. Ariel held her just as fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." A soft keening sound drew their attention to Kira, who stood frozen several feet away, hands pressed to her mouth as she sobbed. Ariel opened one arm, and Kira flew into the embrace. The three sisters sank to their knees, holding each other as 2 years of grief and fear poured out. "I prayed for you every single day." Kira managed between sobs. "I knew in my heart you weren't gone." "I heard you," Ariel said softly, pressing her cheek to Kira's hair. "On my darkest nights I swear I could hear you singing." They stayed tangled together on the floor until their tears subsided. Baron quietly brought them water and tissues, then retreated to give them privacy. As evening settled over the house, they migrated to the oversized sectional that had hosted countless sister talks over the years. "Tell us everything," Naomi demanded, still keeping physical contact with Ariel. "Where were you? What happened?" Over the next several hours, Ariel explained how her investigation into corporate corruption had led her to discover the Covenant Gatekeepers. She detailed their sophisticated operation that used religious rhetoric to mask criminal enterprises. They specifically target successful black professionals and community leaders, she explained. They offer exclusive networking opportunities, spiritual mentorship, financial advice, but it's all designed to gather compromising information they can use for blackmail and control. "That's why they went after you?" Kira asked softly. Ariel nodded. "They realized I was getting too close to exposing them. When they threatened you both, I knew I had to disappear to protect you. I've spent the last 2 years gathering evidence, tracking their operations, building a case that can't be buried or dismissed. You should have trusted us to help you," Naomi said, hurt evident in her voice. "We're stronger together." "I know that now," Ariel admitted. "I was so scared of putting you in danger that I forgot how capable you both are." Over the next week, they fell into a new rhythm. During the days, Naomi and Kira maintained their normal routines to avoid arousing suspicion, while Ariel remained securely hidden in their father's estate. In the evenings, they gathered to share everything that had happened during their 2 years apart. Naomi described building her cybersecurity company, channeling her grief into protecting others from digital threats. "I kept thinking if I'd had better security measures in place, maybe I could have tracked you, helped you somehow." Kira spoke of how her music ministry had expanded, reaching thousands with messages of hope and healing. "Every song I wrote was really about you," she confessed, "about keeping faith alive even in the darkest times." As they talked, a plan began to take shape. Ariel had mapped the cult's communication networks during her time undercover. With Naomi's expertise, they could penetrate the organization's digital defenses and expose their operations. "I can create a secure platform for gathering and storing evidence," Naomi said, her fingers flying over her laptop keyboard, "and implement countermeasures to protect us from their surveillance." Kira's role became clear as well. "The church networks I've built trust with. I can quietly spread awareness about their tactics, help other communities recognize and resist their recruitment efforts. But we have to move carefully," Ariel cautioned. "These people are powerful and dangerous. One wrong move could put everything at risk." 1 week after Ariel's return, they gathered around the formal dining table, the same table where they'd shared their first meal as a family 20 years earlier. Baron sat at the head, looking at his daughters with pride and concern. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Taking on an organization this powerful won't be easy or safe." "We're sure, Dad," Ariel said firmly. "They tried to destroy our family," Naomi added. "We won't let them do that to anyone else." "God brought us together for a reason," Kira said softly. "This is part of our purpose." They joined hands around the table, heads bowed as Kira led them in prayer. Her clear voice carried the words that would guide their mission. "Lord, grant us wisdom to see the truth, courage to speak it, and strength to stand together against darkness. Let our love for each other light the way forward. Amen." As they raised their heads, determination shone in their eyes. The Pike sisters were reunited, and they had work to do. A soft spring breeze rustled through Baron's private study as Ariel hunched over her laptop, surrounded by stacks of encrypted documents she'd gathered during her time undercover. Her fingers trembled slightly as she worked to decode the latest file, a series of internal memos that might finally reveal the true leadership of the Covenant gatekeepers. "Dad! Naomi! Kira!" she called out suddenly, her voice tight with urgency. "You need to see this." Family quickly gathered around her desk, where she pointed to the decoded message on her screen. "Look at this. It's dated just 6 months ago. Silas Rourke really is dead. He passed away in 2005, exactly like the public records showed." She scrolled down, revealing more text. "But his son Luther, he's been running everything from the shadows." Naomi leaned closer, scanning the document. "Luther Rourke. I remember reading about him in business news years ago. He disappeared from public life around the same time his father died. Because he was building this," Ariel explained, pulling up more files. "The Covenant Gatekeepers was his creation. He used his father's old business connections and surveillance techniques, but twisted them into something even darker." Kira wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the warm air. "What does he want?" "Power," Ariel said grimly. "But not just financial power like his father had. Luther believes he can reshape society by controlling influential black voices, religious leaders, artists, business innovators. He calls it influencing the influencers." Baron's face darkened as he read through the documents. "This is why they targeted you, isn't it? They saw 3 successful black women with growing platforms." Before he could finish, Naomi's phone buzzed urgently. She pulled it out, eyes widening. "I got in," she whispered. "The algorithm I created finally cracked their broadcast encryption. There's a video file from Luther himself." They gathered in the living room, clustering together on the sofa, as Naomi connected her phone to the large television screen. The video began playing, showing a man in his early 40s with sharp features and calculated charm. Luther Rourke's voice filled the room, smooth and practiced. "My brothers and sisters in the Covenant," he began, "we stand at a crucial moment in our mission. Our influence grows daily as more cultural leaders accept our guidance and protection." His smile turned predatory. "But there are still those who resist, those who must either be brought into our fold or removed from the equation entirely." The family watched in horror as Luther displayed photographs and dossiers of various prominent black figures, musicians, pastors, business leaders. Then suddenly their own faces appeared on screen. "The Pike sisters," Luther continued, his voice taking on an edge of obsession. "Ariel, our clever journalist who thought she could infiltrate us undetected. Naomi, whose technology threatens our digital sovereignty. And dear Kira, whose music carries dangerous messages of individual empowerment rather than proper submission to authority." Kira grabbed Ariel's hand, squeezing it tight as tears rolled down her cheeks. Naomi's jaw clenched as she fought to maintain her composure. They represent everything that threatens our vision," Luther declared. "Either they will join us and use their influence to further our cause, or they will be dismantled, their reputations destroyed, their platforms silenced, their family torn apart." The video ended, leaving them in stunned silence. Barron stood abruptly, his hands shaking with a mixture of fury and fear. Without a word, he walked to the French doors leading to the balcony and stepped outside into the cool night air. Standing under the vast expanse of stars, Barron gripped the balcony railing until his knuckles turned white. 20 years ago, he had promised to protect these girls, to give them the safety and love they deserved. Now they faced a threat he couldn't simply solve with money or influence. But as he listened to his daughter's voices drifting from inside, Ariel's steady strength, Naomi's fierce determination, Kira's gentle faith, he made a new promise to himself and to God. He would not let them face this battle alone. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as the family they had always been. The morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows as Naomi's fingers flew across her keyboard, lines of code reflecting in her determined eyes. She had been working non-stop for 3 days, rebuilding their compromised digital infrastructure from the ground up. "How's it coming?" Ariel asked, setting a fresh cup of coffee beside her sister. Naomi stretched her tired shoulders. "Just finished the encrypted messaging system. Now we can communicate without Luther's people intercepting anything." She pointed to several screens showing complex security protocols. "I've also got automated monitors scanning for any suspicious activity targeting our accounts or devices." "That's my genius sister." Ariel smiled, squeezing Naomi's shoulder. She pulled out her phone, checking messages from her network of contacts. "I've got 3 former cult members willing to speak on record about Luther's operation. They're scared, but they trust us." In the living room, Kira sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by sheet music and tour schedules. She had spent the week calling small churches across the country, arranging what appeared to be a simple gospel tour. But beneath the surface, each stop would serve as a gathering point for sharing information and building resistance against the cult. "Got another confirmation," Kira announced, marking her calendar. "Little Hope Baptist in Georgia. The pastor there knows 3 families affected by the gatekeepers. They're ready to speak up." Barron watched his daughters with pride, marveling at how they had each found their own way to fight back. "Your mother would be so proud of you all," he said softly. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Naomi worked tirelessly, building digital fortifications while teaching her family how to maintain strict security protocols. Her new system allowed them to safely gather and store evidence against the cult. Ariel met with her contacts in secret locations, collecting testimonies and documents that revealed the true extent of Luther's operation. Each new piece of evidence made her more determined to expose the truth. Kira's tour began in small-town churches, where her powerful voice filled sanctuaries with messages of hope and resilience. After each performance, she would speak privately with families, listening to their stories and connecting them with resources to fight the cult's influence. True to his word, Barron attended every local performance. He sat in the front pew, beaming with pride as Kira's voice soared through ancient hymns and original compositions. Sometimes he would catch himself wiping away tears, remembering that first night in Detroit when 3 little girls had changed his life forever. The culmination of their efforts came 3 weeks after their reunion. A major television network was broadcasting a charity event supporting families affected by trafficking and exploitation. The Pike sisters had been invited to perform, and they knew this was their chance to reach millions. Backstage, the sisters huddled together in prayer before the performance. Kira's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her dress. "Remember when we used to perform this song for Dad in the living room?" Naomi asked, trying to lighten the mood. Ariel laughed softly. He would sit there with the biggest smile, even when we were completely off-key. He still does. Kira smiled, glancing towards the wings where Baron waited, watching them with that same proud expression. The stage lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. 3 spotlights illuminated the stage as the Pike sisters walked out together, taking their positions just as they had done as children. The familiar piano introduction began, and Kira's clear voice lifted into the first verse of Amazing Grace. Ariel and Naomi's voices joined in harmony, weaving together in the same arrangement they had performed that fateful night in Detroit. But now their voices carried the weight of experience, of loss and reunion, of a faith tested but unbroken. As they sang, cameras panned across the audience, showing tears streaming down faces. Social media exploded with clips of the performance, shared millions of times within hours. The message of hope and resilience resonated far beyond the auditorium walls. When the final note faded, the audience erupted in thunderous applause. The sisters stood hand in hand, tears glistening in their eyes as they took in the standing ovation. Backstage, Baron wrapped all 3 of his daughters in a tight embrace. "That was beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. They retreated to the green room, where champagne had been set out in celebration. Kira poured glasses for everyone, and they raised a quiet toast. "To family," Baron said simply. "To fighting back," Naomi added. "To hope." Kira smiled. "To winning," Ariel concluded, belief shining in her eyes. For that precious moment, surrounded by the love and strength of her family, Ariel allowed herself to believe they were turning the tide. The performance had reached millions, planting seeds of awareness that would soon bloom into action. Their careful groundwork was paying off, building momentum that felt unstoppable. Naomi checked her phone, grinning at the flood of positive responses. The video's already gone viral. People are sharing their own stories in the comments, speaking up about similar experiences with cult recruitment. My church contacts are reporting the same thing, Kira added excitedly. People are finally feeling brave enough to come forward. Baron watched his daughters celebrate, his heart full of pride and hope. The long years of separation were behind them now. Together, they were stronger than any force that tried to tear them apart. They stayed in the green room late into the night, sharing memories and plans for the future. For these precious hours, they allowed themselves to simply be a family again, laughing, teasing, and drawing strength from their unshakable bond. The night air felt crisp as Baron guided his daughters out of the television studio's back entrance. Security personnel flanked them until they reached their armored SUV, a precaution that had become routine since Ariel's return. The celebration from earlier still lingered in their smiles as they climbed into the vehicle. "That was incredible," Baron said, adjusting his rear-view mirror. "I haven't seen you 3 perform together like that since you were little." Kira yawned from the back seat, her head resting against Naomi's shoulder. "I can't believe how many people were watching. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing with messages." The drive to their safe house took 45 minutes, winding through back roads and carefully planned routes. Baron had chosen the location himself, a modernized farmhouse set back from the main road, surrounded by tall trees and protected by state-of-the-art security systems. Or so they thought. It was past midnight when they arrived. Ariel helped carry in their performance clothes, while Naomi headed straight for her computer setup to check on her monitoring systems. Kira made hot chocolate for everyone, humming softly in the kitchen. "Get some rest," Baron told them, kissing each daughter's forehead. "You've earned it." None of them noticed the blinking light on Naomi's main server that indicated an unauthorized access point had been created hours earlier. The attack came at 3:15 in the morning. The first window shattered in the living room, followed immediately by smoke grenades rolling across the hardwood floor. Baron jolted awake to the sound of breaking glass and his security system's blaring alarm. He grabbed the gun from his bedside table and ran toward his daughter's rooms. "Dad!" Kira's terrified voice came from down the hall. Orange flames were already licking up the front of the house, illuminating masked figures moving through the yard. The acrid smell of smoke filled the air as Baron reached Kira's room. She stood frozen by her window, staring at the fire spreading across their front lawn. "Move." Baron grabbed her arm, pulling her into the hallway just as Naomi emerged from her room, clutching her laptop. "My servers!" Naomi cried, turning towards her office. "All our evidence is—" Another window exploded inward, and Baron threw himself in front of his daughters as glass rained down around them. "We have to get out now!" "Where's Ariel?" Kira screamed over the chaos. In the makeshift command center they'd set up in the basement, Ariel was frantically destroying hard drives and burning papers. She could hear the fighting above, the sound of boots on wooden floors. Smoke began seeping under the door. "Almost done," she whispered, hands shaking as she fed another document into the shredder. The basement door burst open with a crash. Upstairs, Baron herded Naomi and Kira toward the back exit. The smoke was getting thicker. A figure appeared in the hallway ahead of them, and Baron fired a warning shot that sent the intruder ducking for cover. "Run!" he ordered, pushing his daughters ahead of him. They made it to the kitchen when Kira stumbled, her head hitting the corner of the counter as she fell. Naomi caught her sister before she hit the floor, but Kira's eyes were unfocused, blood trickling from a cut on her temple. More windows shattered. Flames engulfed the front of the house now, and sirens wailed in the distance. Baron scooped up Kira in his arms while Naomi grabbed her sister's legs to help carry her. A scream from the basement made them all freeze. "Ariel!" Naomi turned back, but Baron grabbed her arm. "We can't!" he choked out, tears streaming down his face. "We have to get Kira out." They fled through the back door as fire trucks arrived, their red lights painting the smoke-filled sky. Baron didn't stop running until they reached the tree line, where they watched helplessly as their sanctuary burned. The next few hours passed in a blur. Paramedics examined Kira at the scene, diagnosing her with a concussion. Police took statements. Fire crews battled the blaze, but there was no sign of Ariel. Dawn found them in a high-security hotel room with armed guards posted outside. Kira lay sedated on one of the beds, while Naomi sat shell-shocked in a chair, staring at nothing. Her servers, containing months of careful intelligence gathering, had been destroyed in the fire. Baron's phone buzzed with an incoming video message. His hands trembled as he opened it. Luther Rourke's face filled the screen, his eyes cold and triumphant. "You saved them once in 1995. He said softly. "You won't save them again." The phone slipped from Baron's fingers. His legs gave out, and he sank to the floor, a broken man. For the second time, he had lost his eldest daughter. But this time, he had watched it happen. This time, he had been forced to choose which daughters to save. The morning sun crept through the hotel windows, illuminating Baron's crumpled form as he wept silently, his shoulders shaking with the weight of unbearable grief. The fluorescent lights of Detroit General Hospital cast harsh shadows across Baron Pike's exhausted face as he made his way down the sterile corridor to room 312. His footsteps echoed against the linoleum floors, each step feeling heavier than the last. Through the window, he could see Naomi sitting beside Kira's hospital bed. She hadn't moved for hours, her dark eyes fixed on her younger sister's sleeping form. The usual spark of determination in Naomi's face had dimmed to something hollow and distant. Baron pushed open the door quietly. The steady beep of the heart monitor provided the only sound in the room. Kira stirred at his entrance, her eyes fluttering open beneath the white bandage wrapped around her head. "Daddy?" she whispered, reaching out a hand. The word broke something in Baron's chest. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, gathering both his daughters close. Naomi's shoulders began to shake as she finally let herself cry. "I'm here," Baron murmured, his voice rough with unshed tears. "I've got you both." They clung to each other, 3 pieces of a broken family, while morning sunlight crept across the hospital room floor. None of them spoke about the empty space where Ariel should have been. Dr. Chen arrived an hour later with Kira's test results, her clipboard tucked under one arm. "The CT scan shows a mild concussion," she explained gently. "With rest and careful monitoring, she should make a full recovery within a few weeks." Baron nodded mechanically, barely processing the words. His mind kept replaying that terrible moment of choice. Kira unconscious, Ariel's scream from below, the flames spreading faster and faster. "Mr. Pike." Dr. Chen's voice drew him back to the present. "Would you like me to arrange for a grief counselor?" "No," he said shortly. "Thank you, Doctor." After she left, Baron pressed a kiss to Kira's forehead and squeezed Naomi's shoulder. "I need some air," he managed to say. "I'll be back soon." His feet carried him without conscious thought to the hospital chapel on the first floor. It was empty, lit only by a few flickering candles near the altar. Baron stood in the doorway, staring at the wooden cross mounted on the wall. 20 years of carefully built faith crumbled in his chest, replaced by a rage so intense it frightened him. He stalked down the aisle, his hands clenched into fists. "Why?" he demanded of the silent chapel. "I trusted you with them. I believed you brought them to me for a reason." His voice rose with each word. "I've tried to live right, to help others, to be worthy of this gift. And now you let them take her? Again?" Only the echo of his own words answered him. Baron sank into a pew, his anger dissolving into grief. Hours passed as he sat there wrestling with his soul, watching dust motes dance in the colored light from the stained glass windows. Finally, in a whisper so quiet it was barely a breath, he repeated the prayer he'd made that first night in 1995, when 3 little girls had changed his life forever. "If you help me save them, I'll spend my life helping others. I remember you making that promise." Baron turned to find Kira standing in the chapel doorway, leaning slightly against the frame for support. She looked impossibly young in her hospital gown, but her eyes held a strength that made his heart ache with pride. "You should be resting," he said, rising to help her. Kira shook her head carefully. "We can't stop now, Daddy. Ariel needs us. All these years she was fighting alone to protect us. We can't abandon her." Baron wrapped an arm around his youngest daughter's shoulders, supporting her weight as they stood together before the altar. "No," he agreed softly. "We can't." That evening, after signing Kira's discharge papers against medical advice, they made their way to the temporary apartment Baron had arranged. It was a far cry from their destroyed home, just 2 bedrooms and a small living area, but it had the highest security system money could buy. Kira settled onto the couch while Baron checked the locks and surveillance cameras for the 3rd time. When he returned to the living room, he found Naomi had retrieved her backup laptop from its hiding place. "The servers may be gone," she said, her voice hoarse but determined, "but I backed up the most critical files to an encrypted cloud drive. We can rebuild our intelligence from there." Baron watched as his middle daughter's fingers flew across the keyboard, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. The same quiet determination that had helped her build her first computer program at age 12 now drove her to fight through her grief. They gathered around the coffee table, spreading out maps and documents as they formed a plan. Kira contributed what she remembered from Ariel's investigation, while Naomi worked to trace possible locations where the cult might have taken her sister. Baron looked at his daughters. Kira with her bandaged head held high, Naomi's face set in lines of fierce concentration, and felt a surge of both love and fear. They were all he had left in the world, and they were diving right back into danger. But they were right. Ariel had sacrificed everything to protect them. Now it was their turn to save her. As night fell over the city, Naomi's laptop cast shadows on the wall while she typed, refusing to let exhaustion or grief slow her down. They had lost Ariel once before and survived. This time, they would bring her home. Morning sunlight filtered through the apartment's bulletproof windows as Naomi sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by stacks of files. Her laptop hummed steadily beside her as she scrolled through old emails, searching for specific names. Got them, she muttered, pulling up a list of contacts. Over the past 5 years, her tech company had funded several veteran rehabilitation programs, providing cutting-edge prosthetics and job training. She'd kept in touch with many of the veterans, particularly a group led by Marcus Hale. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard for just a moment before she typed out a message. Marcus, need your expertise, family emergency, life or death. Can you come? Naomi Pike. The response came within minutes. On my way, team assembled in 4 hours. Baron watched from the kitchen as Naomi worked, noting how she unconsciously mirrored Ariel's focused expression when deep in concentration. He brought her a cup of coffee, which she accepted without looking up. By noon, Marcus Hale and his team of 4 other veterans had arrived at their secure location. They gathered around the dining room table, now covered with satellite images and building schematics Naomi had obtained through her tech connections. The compound is here, Naomi explained, pointing to a seemingly abandoned warehouse complex outside the city. They're masking their power usage by tapping into old industrial lines, but their data footprint is unmistakable. Marcus, a tall man with steel-grey hair and steady hands, studied the layouts. Security patterns? They rotate guards every 4 hours, Naomi replied. But there's more. She pulled out a crumpled food wrapper that had been smuggled out by one of their informants. Tiny marks were scratched into the foil, a code Ariel had developed with her sisters years ago. Kira, who had been quietly observing from the couch, moved closer. She's telling us about the ventilation system, she translated, running her finger along the marks. And there's a blind spot in their camera coverage on the east side. Marcus nodded approvingly. Your sister's good. Even captured, she's thinking like an operator. The team spent hours analyzing every detail. They were all combat veterans who had served multiple tours, steady, professional, and motivated not by money, but by loyalty to Naomi and the cause she represented. Meanwhile, across town, Baron sat in a federal agent's office, his patience wearing thin. We have concrete evidence now, he insisted, spreading photographs across the desk. Financial records linking the Covenant gatekeepers to human trafficking, witness testimonies, proof of their involvement in domestic terrorism. The agent, who had dismissed them 2 years ago, now leaned forward with interest. This is substantial, she admitted. And you say church groups across the country are demanding action? Baron nodded. My daughter Kira has built a network of over 300 congregations. They're all praying, all watching, all expecting justice. He didn't mention that many of these church leaders had received anonymous digital files detailing the cult's activities in their communities. Back at the apartment, Kira was on her phone, coordinating with pastors and community leaders. Her head still ached from the concussion, but her voice remained strong and clear. We need everyone praying at sunset, she explained, a unified voice crying out for justice. By evening, Marcus's team had developed a preliminary infiltration plan. They would enter through the blind spot Ariel had identified, using the ventilation system to access the lower levels where prisoners were likely held. "We'll need a distraction," Marcus explained, pointing to the main gate. "Something big enough to draw their security teams forward." Naomi's fingers flew across her keyboard. "I can trigger their fire suppression systems remotely. It'll create chaos, give us coverage." The plan continued taking shape as night fell. Local law enforcement, finally spurred to action by mounting political pressure and the evidence Barron had presented, agreed to provide backup once the team confirmed Ariel's location. At midnight, Marcus gathered his team for final preparations. They would move at dawn, when guard shifts changed and attention typically wavered. "Get some rest," he advised the family. "Tomorrow will test all of us." But rest seemed impossible. Naomi continued refining her digital infiltration plan. Kira prayed quietly in the corner, her phone occasionally lighting up with messages from prayer warriors across the country. Barron stepped out onto the apartment's balcony, needing a moment alone. The city stretched before him, a tapestry of lights and shadows. Somewhere out there, his eldest daughter was waiting, fighting, believing they would come. He gripped the railing, remembering how tiny her hand had felt in his that first night at the community center. How brave she'd been, even then. How brave she still was. "Hold on, baby girl," he whispered into the night wind. "I'm coming." Inside, Naomi looked up from her computer screen, watching her father's silhouette against the city lights. She thought of Ariel's strength, of Kira's faith, of their father's unwavering love. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. Marcus and his team retired to their assigned positions, checking weapons and communications equipment one final time. They had faced dangerous missions before, but the stakes here felt different. This wasn't just another operation, it was about family, about righting a wrong that had festered for too long. In her makeshift cell, unknown to them all, Ariel scratched another coded message into her dinner tray, praying it would reach her family in time. She had mapped every guard rotation, every security camera blind spot, every potential escape route. Now she just had to stay strong, stay alert, and trust that her family was coming. The night deepened as final preparations were made. Kira's prayer network spread across time zones, creating a continuous chain of intercession. Naomi's security programs stood ready to breach the cult's defenses. Marcus's team rested but remained vigilant, weapons cleaned and checked, routes memorized. Barron remained on the balcony, his whispered promise carried away by the wind, but his determination solid as steel. After all these years, all the victories and losses, all the joy and pain of raising 3 remarkable daughters, tomorrow would test everything they'd become as a family. The city lights twinkled below, countless stars in an urban galaxy, as midnight slipped toward dawn and the moment of truth drew near. The mountain roads wound through darkness like black ribbons against the pre-dawn sky. 3 unmarked vehicles traveled in convoy formation, headlights cutting through lingering patches of fog. Inside the lead SUV, Barron sat rigid beside Marcus, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. 10 minutes to target. Marcus spoke quietly into his radio. His team responded with crisp acknowledgments, their voices steady despite the tension. In the back seat, Naomi typed furiously on her laptop, monitoring the compound's security feeds. "Guards are rotating positions now," she reported, just like Ariel's intel suggested. The convoy turned onto an unmarked dirt road, engines growling as they climbed higher into the mountains. Through breaks in the trees, they could see the compound, a sprawling collection of buildings that looked more like a corporate retreat than a cult headquarters. Inside her cell, Ariel Pike lay on a thin mattress, eyes closed but mind alert. The familiar heavy footsteps of the morning guard patrol echoed down the corridor. She had memorized their rhythm over the past days, using it to mark time. But today something felt different. There was an underlying current of tension in the air, a shift in the usual patterns. She pressed her hands together, whispering prayers into the darkness. Lord, give them wisdom, keep them safe. Her bruised ribs ached with each breath, but she forced herself to remain still, waiting. The rescue team parked their vehicles in a sheltered ravine half a mile from the compound. Marcus's men moved with practiced efficiency, checking weapons and communication devices. Baron strapped on a protective vest, his movements mechanical but determined. Remember, Marcus briefed them one final time. We go in through the service entrance. Federal agents will secure the perimeter while we extract the target. He looked at Baron. Stay close to me. Dawn was just beginning to paint the eastern sky as they approached the compound's outer fence. Naomi's voice came through their earpieces. Security systems disabled in 3, 2, 1. The fence's electronic locks clicked open. Teams moved forward in formation, using the pre-dawn shadows for cover. Baron's heart pounded as they reached the service entrance, but his hands remained steady. Inside the compound, Luther Rourke sat at his desk reviewing overnight reports when his screen suddenly went dark. What the... He reached for his phone, but the lines were dead. The first alarms began to sound, high, piercing wails that echoed through concrete corridors. Guards rushed to their stations, but found their security protocols unresponsive. Ariel heard the alarms and sat up, hope rising in her chest. The sound of boots thundering past her cell door grew chaotic, disorganized. She moved to the corner furthest from the door, ready. Baron followed Marcus through dimly lit hallways, their footsteps quick but controlled. Federal agents secured each intersection, efficiently neutralizing any resistance. The veterans moved with lethal grace, years of training evident in every motion. Lower level, Marcus directed, heading toward a stairwell. Cell block should be through the north corridor. Luther Rourke grabbed his emergency bag and headed for his private elevator, cursing as he found it non-operational. Seal all exits, he barked into his radio. No one gets in or out. But his carefully constructed world was already crumbling. Federal agents had surrounded the compound, blocking every escape route. His security forces, faced with overwhelming tactical superiority, began surrendering. Baron and Marcus reached the cell block, checking each room. Ariel! Baron called out, voice hoarse with emotion. Baby girl, where are you? Dad. Her voice, weak but clear, came from the end of the corridor. I'm here. They found her in the last cell, curled in the corner. The sight of her, thin, bruised, but alive, nearly brought Baron to his knees. Marcus made quick work of the lock, while Baron rushed to his daughter's side. You came, she whispered, tears streaming down her face as he gathered her into his arms. You really came. Always. Baron choked out, cradling her head against his chest. I will always come for you. Above them, chaos erupted as Luther made a desperate break for freedom. He barely made it 20 feet before Federal agents tackled him to the ground. As they cuffed him, he thrashed and screamed, You think this ends with me? The Pikes can't hide forever? But his threats fell on deaf ears. The compound was already being swept clean, evidence collected, victims freed. Smoke rose from several buildings where documents were being destroyed by cult members. But it was too late. Naomi had already copied their entire digital infrastructure. Baron carried Ariel out of the cell block, her arms locked around his neck like she was 6 years old again. Marcus and his team formed a protective circle around them as they ascended to the main level. Dad! Ariel sobbed into his chest, her whole body trembling. I just wanted to come home. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to come home. Shh, he soothed, holding her tighter. You're safe now. We're going home together. They emerged from the compound into strengthening daylight. Medical teams rushed forward with stretchers, but Ariel clung to her father, refusing to let go. Smoke continued rising from various buildings, marking the end of the Covenant gatekeeper's reign of terror. Federal agents escorted Luther Rourke past them toward an armored vehicle. He locked eyes with Ariel for a moment, but she turned her face away, pressing closer to her father's chest. His curses faded as he was driven away, leaving only the sound of victory in their wake. The Mountain Rehabilitation Lodge stood serenely against a backdrop of towering pines, its wooden walls offering sanctuary to the Pike family as they began their journey of healing. 2 days after the rescue, Ariel lay in a comfortable bed while sunlight streamed through large windows, casting warm patterns across the quilted blanket that covered her thin frame. The medical staff had treated her physical injuries, the bruises, the malnutrition, the rope burns on her wrists, but they knew the deeper healing would take time. Naomi and Kira maintained their vigil, one sister always within arm's reach, as if afraid Ariel might disappear again if they looked away too long. "You need to eat more," Naomi insisted, pushing a bowl of soup closer to Ariel's hands. Her usual sharp edges had softened, replaced by gentle concern. "The doctor said you're still 15 pounds underweight." Ariel managed a small smile, reaching for the spoon with slightly trembling fingers. "I'm trying," she whispered. "Everything tastes so different now, so intense." Kira sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed, her gospel music playing softly from a small speaker. "Take your time," she soothed, reaching out to squeeze Ariel's ankle through the blanket. "We're not going anywhere." In the oversized armchair by the bed, Baron dozed fitfully, his tall frame curved uncomfortably into the space where he'd spent every night since their arrival. The girls often caught him watching Ariel sleep, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and lingering fear. As days turned into weeks, color slowly returned to Ariel's cheeks. Her voice grew stronger, and she began sharing pieces of her story during their long afternoons together. The sisters would gather on her bed, wrapped in soft blankets, while she spoke of her time undercover. "I thought about you every single day," she told them, tears sliding down her face. "Sometimes when things got really dark, I'd close my eyes and imagine I could hear Kira singing, or picture Naomi arguing with her computer, or feel Dad's hugs." Naomi wiped her own eyes, trying to hide it with her usual sarcasm. "Well, you missed some quality tech rants. I nearly threw my laptop out the window at least 12 times. Their laughter, though sometimes watery with tears, began filling the lodge more frequently. The staff noticed how the sisters gravitated toward each other, moving in an orbit of protective love. They shared meals together, prayed together, and slowly rebuilt the bonds that distance and trauma had strained. Baron participated quietly in these moments, content to watch his daughters heal. But sometimes, late at night, when the others were asleep, Ariel would find him still awake in his chair. "You should sleep in a real bed, Dad," she'd whisper. "I'm right where I need to be." He'd always answer, reaching out to hold her hand until she drifted off again. The outside world buzzed with news of the cult's collapse. Major networks ran special reports detailing the Covenant gatekeepers' years of manipulation and the dramatic rescue that brought them down. But inside the lodge, protected by enhanced security and the natural barrier of the mountains, the Pike family focused only on healing. Physical therapy sessions helped Ariel regain her strength. She started with short walks down the lodge's hallways, sisters flanking her like protective angels. Eventually, she managed longer excursions onto the grounds, breathing in the crisp mountain air that tasted of freedom. During these weeks, they also discovered new ways to support each other. Kira would sing hymns that made the lodge staff stop in their tracks, her voice carrying hope through every corridor. Naomi set up a secure communication system so they could stay connected with the investigation while maintaining their privacy. Baron handled the media pressure with quiet dignity, protecting his family while ensuring justice would be served. The transformation was gradual but steady. Ariel's nightmares became less frequent. Her appetite returned, especially for the comfort foods of their childhood that Baron had the kitchen prepare. She began joining her sisters for morning devotionals on the lodge's wraparound porch, their voices mixing in prayer as the sun rose over the mountains. One particularly peaceful afternoon, about 6 weeks into their stay, the sisters stood together on that same porch. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Ariel stood between her sisters, their hands linked in a chain of unbreakable love. "I never thought I'd have this again," Ariel said softly, squeezing their hands. "Just standing here, watching the sunset with my sisters." Naomi leaned her head against Ariel's shoulder. "Well, get used to it. You're stuck with us now." "Forever and ever, amen," Kira added with a gentle smile, echoing their childhood prayer routine. The sun continued its graceful descent behind the hills, casting long shadows across the lodge grounds. In that moment, wrapped in the comfort of sisterly love and the peace of the mountains, Ariel felt truly safe for the first time in years. The three sisters stood in comfortable silence, their joined hands a testament to the family bonds that had survived every trial and emerged stronger. 3 months after their time at the mountain lodge, autumn painted Detroit's trees in brilliant shades of red and gold. The Pike Foundation's newly renovated headquarters stood proudly in the heart of downtown, its glass walls reflecting the morning sun. Inside, preparations were underway for the official launch of their most ambitious project yet. Baron adjusted his tie, standing before a podium emblazoned with their new logo, 3 interlinked circles representing the sisters, with a protective arc above symbolizing both divine protection and fatherly love. Behind him, photographs of young people whose lives they'd already begun to touch lined the walls. "The Pike Youth Protection Initiative," he announced to the packed auditorium, his voice steady and warm, "exists because every child deserves to grow up safe, loved, and free from exploitation." In the front row, his daughters sat together, each representing different aspects of their mission. Naomi had developed cutting-edge software to detect online recruitment patterns. Kira had created support programs, combining music therapy with faith-based counseling. And Ariel, drawing from her own experiences, had designed comprehensive training to help communities recognize and prevent youth exploitation. Their memoir, Saved Twice, A Family's Journey Through Darkness to Light, sat displayed on easels throughout the room. The book had already touched countless lives, its raw honesty and message of hope resonating deeply with readers across the country. Each sister had contributed chapters, sharing their unique perspectives on their journey from that first night in 1995 to their recent reunion. After the ceremony, reporters gathered around the family, asking about their plans for expansion. Kira's voice rang out clear and confident. "We're starting with 10 cities, but our goal is nationwide reach within 5 years. Every community center, every church, every school that needs our resources will have access to them." Her gospel song, "Hold On, We're Coming Home," had become more than just music. It was now a rallying cry for families searching for lost loved ones. The melody played softly in the background as attendees explored the Foundation's facilities, its lyrics speaking of hope in the darkest times and the promise of dawn after night. Later that evening, the family gathered at Baron's house, their house, for their traditional Sunday dinner. The sprawling porch, wrapped in twinkling lights, had become their favorite place to end each week together. The autumn air carried the humid sweetness of late summer, and cicadas hummed their evening symphony from nearby trees. Naomi set out plates while Kira arranged flowers in the center of the outdoor table. Ariel helped Baron carry out serving dishes filled with their favorite comfort foods, his famous pot roast, sweet potato casserole, and fresh rolls that filled the air with their warm, yeasty scent. They settled into their seats as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of pink and orange. The same sunset they'd watched countless times before, yet somehow more beautiful now that they were all together again. Ariel looked across the table at Baron, who was passing the butter to Kira. The fading sunlight caught the silver in his hair, and suddenly she was overwhelmed by the fullness of her heart. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for his hand. "You didn't save us once, Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved us twice." Baron squeezed her hand gently, his own eyes glistening. "No, sweetheart," he replied softly. "God saved all of us." The family joined hands around the table, forming an unbroken circle of love and faith. As the cicadas continued their gentle chorus and the last rays of sunlight painted their faces in golden light, they bowed their heads in prayer. Each heart overflowed with gratitude, not just for their safety and reunion, but for the deeper peace they'd found through their trials. In that sacred moment, surrounded by the love of family and wrapped in the comfort of God's presence, they were exactly where they needed to be. Together, whole, and filled with renewed purpose for the journey ahead. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows, casting warm patterns across the granite countertops as Baron Pike moved with practiced ease between the stove and refrigerator. The familiar sizzle of pancakes on the griddle filled the air, mingling with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the same breakfast ritual he'd perfected over 20 years of fatherhood. Ariel was the first to appear, moving carefully but with increasing strength. The bruises from her captivity had faded to yellow-green shadows, and her eyes held more light with each passing day. She sank into her usual chair at the kitchen island, wrapping her hands around a steaming mug of coffee. "Morning, Dad," she said softly, watching him flip a perfectly golden pancake. Naomi arrived next, already dressed for the day in a sleek blazer, her laptop tucked under one arm. She settled beside Ariel, immediately pulling up her emails. "The response to the foundation has been incredible," she said, scrolling through her inbox. 3 more major cities want to implement our youth protection programs." The gentle strumming of guitar strings announced Kira's presence before she appeared, humming a melody as she entered the kitchen. Her natural joy seemed to brighten the room as she hugged Baron from behind, peeking around him at the pancakes. "Still the best breakfast chef in Detroit," she teased, reaching for a fresh strawberry from the cutting board. "Those are for the pancakes, young lady." Baron chuckled, but his eyes crinkled with pleasure at the familiar morning chaos of his daughters together again. They gathered around the table, passing plates of fluffy pancakes drizzled with real maple syrup, crispy bacon, and fresh fruit. Kira adjusted her guitar strap, occasionally plucking strings between bites as she planned her afternoon live stream set list. Naomi continued sharing updates about foundation partnerships, while Ariel listened intently, offering strategic suggestions from her years of investigative experience. After breakfast, they piled into Baron's black SUV for the drive to their old neighborhood. The Detroit streets had changed over the decades, some areas revitalized while others still showed signs of struggle. As they approached the community center, memories washed over them, both painful and precious. The old brick building had been transformed. Gone were the crumbling steps and faded paint. In their place stood a welcoming facade with large windows and modern architectural touches. Children raced across the new courtyard, their laughter echoing off the walls as they chased each other through the afternoon sunshine. Baron gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind flooding with images from that spring night in 1995. The smoke, the screams, 3 tiny girls clutching his hands as they fled the burning building. Now, watching children play safely in this renewed space, emotion threatened to overwhelm him. Kira squeezed his shoulder from the back seat. "You okay, Dad?" He nodded, clearing his throat. "Just grateful," he managed. The ceremony itself was simple but powerful. Community leaders spoke about the impact the Pike family had made, not just through their financial support, but through their example of resilience and faith. The new performing arts wing gleamed with state-of-the-art equipment, practice rooms, and a small theatre space. As dusk began to settle, casting long shadows across the courtyard, the family stood together beneath the newly unveiled mural. The artist had captured them perfectly. 3 young sisters in their Sunday best, standing before a microphone, with Baron watching proudly from the back row. Beside the image, written in elegant script, were the words from their memoir. "Hope begins with one act of love." Ariel leaned against Baron's shoulder, while Naomi and Kira each held one of his hands. Together they studied their younger selves immortalized on the wall, a reminder of where their journey began and how far they'd come. Walking back to the car, their footsteps fell in sync across the new courtyard. The weight of their past, the separation, the fear, the pain, seemed to lift a little more with each step. Their story, which had nearly destroyed them, had been transformed into something beautiful, a light in the darkness for others to follow home. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.